everybody, welcome to another multi-game My Thoughts On video, and the theme for this one is Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. In other words, I'll be taking a look at 5 different games centered around alchemy and potion making. And as is typically the case with these multi-game My Thoughts On videos, I really don't have all that much to say about each game individually, so I decided to go ahead and put them all into the same video here. And so I'll be taking a look at Alchemy Garden, Alchemy Story, Potion Craft, Potion Permit, and finally, Potionomics. So let's just go ahead and get things started with Alchemy Garden. Developed by Mad Sushi Games and released in December of last year, with the initial early access release being in October of 2019. When you start this game off, you name your alchemy shop, and then you name your character and select what they look like, and then you're basically just dropped in without really much direction at all. You get a few very simple tutorial prompts that tell you some basics about how to play the game, and then you're just let loose. From there, it's up to you to wander around the game world and find various ingredients that you can put into your potions, to mine ores and stone, and to chop down trees so you can construct things, and to brew potions that you can then sell in your shop or use to fulfill various requests at the town, which will give you a large amount of money. This money can then be used to either repair or upgrade your shop, as well as purchase furniture for your shop, purchase tools, purchase seeds, whatever you may well need for your shop at any given moment. The actual brewing potions part is a very simple minigame where you need to select 3 ingredients and then you can pulverize those with a mortar and pestle, then put them into your cauldron and tap the use button repeatedly until it heats up to the appropriate amount on the bar, and then you've got a potion. The various potion ingredients all have an element associated with them, something like healing or ether, that influences what potion effects it can produce. And so you'll have to experiment with these ingredients to find the different recipes. Once you have a recipe, then you can just click it in the list and it will automatically throw whatever ingredients are appropriate for that recipe into the mix, and then you can just go right to making the potion, instead of having to select each individual ingredient first. But that's really the extent of the complexity of the game. There's really not much to it. You gather ingredients, you can grow ingredients in your garden by using a hoe to till the land, and then you plant a seed, and then you water that seed for a few days, and then it will sprout into something you can actually use. And then if you want to plant something else, then you need to till the land again and plant another seed, and so on and so forth. There aren't any stipulations for fertilizer, or what land you're using, or what season it is, or anything like that. You just plant it, you water it, and then you're done. And as for the shop mechanics, they're really not explained all that well. It is a fairly straightforward system in the sense that you just place whatever potions you want to sell onto the table, and then your customers will wander in, they'll look over it. If something they want is there, then they'll pick it up and purchase it and then walk out. If it's not there, then they might go over to the counter and ask if you have something, in which case you can sell that to them if you have it, and if you don't, you'll have to turn them away. And that's really it. There's nothing else you can really do with it, especially considering that the potion ingredients are randomly generated at the start of every day, so if you're wandering around and trying to find specific ingredients, you just may not find them. And then when you open your shop and people are wanting, say, healing potions, if you didn't have a bunch of healing herbs that you found wandering around, well, you can't make a bunch of healing potions. There aren't any penalties for it as far as I can tell, you're just missing out on potential sales. But it's still a bit annoying, and when you look at the entire experience of Alchemy Garden as a whole, you end up with something that is incredibly simplistic to the point of being a detriment. While the mechanics are all certainly functional, they're nothing more than that. They don't do anything that is actually all that interesting with any of the mechanics, and there's just nothing really to explore or discover as you wander around the world. I mean, there's a handful of townsfolk, and they're not remotely interesting. In fact, within the span of an hour, they were already starting to repeat dialogue, so there's just not much going on here, and as a result, I really can't recommend Alchemy Garden at all. Next we have Alchemy Story by Cozy Bee Games, and it was released in April of 2020, and the idea here is that you play as an apprentice alchemist named Arabelle, who is helping the professor, a much more experienced alchemist, to help lift the curse that was placed upon a village by an evil witch, that turned most of its inhabitants into animals. To do this, you need to gather 3 mementos for each townsperson that is afflicted by this curse, and talk to them until they remember their name, upon which point you can go to the library and turn them back into a person. Once they're restored, then they can be talked to, and you can gain relationship points with them, and you can also purchase things from their shop. This will also gradually unlock things for you to do beyond simply wandering around talking to villagers and gathering materials. Early on, you'll be able to go around and dig up various relics that will go into the museum, as well as go fishing to get fish. And after you've saved a few villagers, you'll be able to go into the mines and get some ore and stone. You'll be able to go chop down trees to get lumber, and so on and so forth. In other words, it plays in the same vein as something along the lines of Harvest Moon or Stardew Valley or Rune Factory or something like that, where it plays out a bit more like a farming or life sim than anything else. And in fact, the alchemy part of the game, where you're actually brewing potions, is a very hands-off experience. You don't really do anything with that. You just gather a bunch of materials, you go up to your cauldron, and then you just press the brew it button when you select the recipe you want to brew, and there you've got a potion now. It's almost like an afterthought, really. It's a bit of an odd thing for alchemy to be in the title, and the actual alchemy component of it just being kind of background stuff or really just a side activity. And when you combine that with the very slow movement speed and how tedious it is to gather materials and such, it just ends up being a game that's really just not engaging at all. It's just frankly quite boring. And while that very, very cutesy art style and laid-back atmosphere might do it for some folks, in my particular case, the art style actually gave me a headache, and I think it was just how bright it is. And it's also worth noting that the game is apparently quite glitchy. I didn't really play it long enough to get to any of the glitches, but I've seen a lot of reports of people running into all manner of weird glitches, from just visual problems to event triggers not working properly, and even some save glitches where it's just not saving progress. So your mileage may vary on that, but based on what I've experienced with Alchemy Story, it's just not very interesting, and it ended up giving me a headache, so I really can't recommend it. Next, we have Potion Craft, developed by Nice Play Games and published by Tiny Build, and had its full release in December of last year, with early access starting in September of 2021. The idea here is that you're the town's new alchemist, and so you need to prepare ingredients, brew potions, sell them to the townsfolk, and gradually learn more and more potion effects, leading to more complex potions, and eventually working your way towards the Philosopher's Stone. Your primary source of ingredients is your magic garden, which replenishes once a day and gives you a random assortment of potion ingredients, and when they show up at your shop, you can also purchase ingredients from some vendors who will sell you different types of ingredients. For example, the herbalist sells you herbs, whereas the mushroom gatherer sells you mushrooms. Occasionally a vendor will also come by and sell you paper for your recipe book, which will allow you to store more recipes, and sometimes you'll also be able to purchase new alchemy equipment. This will allow you to produce more advanced ingredients like albedo, which are gained by distilling multiple different potions down into one special ingredient, and there are also other alchemical tools that will allow you to produce different effects than you normally would get. As you continue to produce potions and sell them, you will gradually earn reputation, and this also changes a bit depending on what clientele you serve. Because there's a general renown stat, and there's also an alignment stat, where if you serve the more shady elements like thieves and cutthroats and such, then you'll get more of a negative reputation, whereas if you serve more heroes and stuff like that, then you'll get more of a positive reputation, and that just influences who will show up at your shop and what they'll be asking for. When a customer shows up at your shop, they'll ask you for a potion that will help them with a specific thing, and then you need to figure out what they meant by the way they described it, with opportunities for getting a bit of additional cash out of it by fulfilling certain requests that they might have. For example, they might ask for a specific ingredient in the production of their potion, and then when you custom brew them a potion that meets those parameters, then they'll give you a bit of extra money when they go and buy it. You can also get a bit more money out of your customers by using the haggle system, which is a very simple minigame where you have a bar that shows up on the screen and you'll see a bunch of images displayed on it, and you can press a button whenever the cursor moves over one of those images to get a bit of extra money added to the total that you'll be hopefully selling that particular potion for. If you mess up the timing, however, and you click when an image is not under the cursor, then it will actually remove money from the total, and if you screw the whole thing up, then you can actually end up selling the potion for a lot less than you originally would have if you had just sold it without haggling, but if you do it properly, then you'll be selling the potion at a markup. But what about the actual potion brewing itself? Well, that's really the star of the show here. To make a potion, you have to prepare the ingredients, put them in your cauldron, stir it up, and then heat it up to an appropriate degree. It's a simple enough idea that is made a bit more complicated and a lot more interesting by having the potion effects scattered out across a map that you will gradually discover as you just continue to put ingredients into the cauldron and stir it up and just see what you can get. Each ingredient has a specific pattern that it will allow the cursor, which is just a potion icon, to move along, and you can extend the path that these move on by grinding up that particular potion ingredient in the mortar and pestle. As you combine these ingredients and stir up the mixture, it will move the potion icon around the alchemy map, and you will gradually find what are small icons of books that will give you research points, which will gradually level you up and allow you to purchase upgrades to things like your ability to haggle, as well as your ability to see more of the alchemy map as you continue to explore it, and so on and so forth. And the idea is to get the potion icon into the outline of whatever potion effect you want to achieve as closely as possible in order to get the highest quality potion available. If you just barely get it within the outline, then it's considered a weak potion. If you get it decently within there, then it's considered a normal potion, and if it's very close to the outline, then it's going to be a strong potion. The higher quality of the potion, the better price it will fetch. Although sometimes a customer will specifically request a weak potion. As you continue to explore the alchemy map and find the different effects and brew different potions, you'll make progress in what are referred to as chapters, which are really not much more than just a sequence of achievements that you can unlock, and as you complete those, you move on to the next chapter. And these can be completed out of order. You don't need to complete chapter 1 in order to work on stuff for chapter 2, 3, 4, etc. As long as you have the appropriate ingredients to reach that point on the alchemy map, you can brew whatever potion you like. The only thing you really need to be careful for is not to have the potion icon wander into the areas that look like they're full of death and destruction, because that will just cause your potion to fail. There's no significant problem with that other than just losing the ingredients that you had put into it, but it is still something to keep in mind. It's also important to note that the potion making itself is partially reliant on physics. When you're grinding up ingredients in the mortar and pestle, you're actually taking the pestle and grinding them into the mortar. When you're stirring the mixture, you actually have to grab hold of the stirring spoon and stir the mixture yourself. And when it comes to heating it up, you have to grab the bellows and move them up and down in order to generate the heat. And if you need to dilute the mixture a bit to bring it closer to the origin point of the potion, then you need to grab hold of the appropriate apparatus and gradually tip it so that it pours liquid into the mixture, and you gradually move at the pace you need to. This all makes it feel like you have a lot of fine control over the brewing of potions, and it also makes it pretty easy to get into a sort of zen-like state as you're brewing the potions and gradually trying to achieve perfection with them. The thing is, there's not really much to it beyond that. Sure, it's got a charming art style that's based loosely on medieval artwork, but beyond that, you're just brewing potions, you're moving over to your magic garden to get ingredients, and you're dealing with customers and vendors, and nothing else. It's a rather simple and straightforward game, at least at first. It does get more complicated once you start getting into the more complex alchemical formulas, but those aren't so much challenging as they are tedious. They just require a lot of ingredients, and in some cases you need to put a lot of ingredients and a lot of potions into producing more advanced ingredients, like say albedo, and then working those into additional concoctions and just continuing the process until eventually you end up making something as complicated as the Philosopher's Stone. None of this is ever especially difficult, so just about anybody can pick it up and play it without much trouble. There's not really anything in the game that actively works against you, although the RNG with getting ingredients can be a bit annoying at first before you've built up a stock of ingredients, and it's a rather easy game to just jump in and out of, so if something like that seems up your alley, then you might as well give potion craft a try. It's fairly cheap, and it's actually quite good at what it does. It's just that what it's setting out to achieve is a very narrow focus, so you're really either going to like that, or you're just not going to like it. There's not going to be much in between there. But if it does seem like something you'd be interested in, I'd say go ahead and give it a try. Next up we have Potion Permit, developed by Mass Hive Media and published by P-Cubed back in September, and the idea here is that you are a chemist, a member of the Medical Association from the capital, who ventures out to a remote town called Moonbury, where the mayor's daughter has an illness that the traditional healing methods used by the town is unable to cure. This is the game's tutorial. You cure the mayor's daughter of her illness, and then it's ultimately decided that you'll take up residence in the town and assist the locals in curing whatever ails them. To do that, you'll not only need to venture out into the wilderness to gather materials, but you'll also need to win over the trust of the locals, because they just don't trust people from the capital for reasons that you'll gradually uncover as you continue to explore and find out more about Moonbury. And once you're out of the initial tutorial, which is just curing the mayor's daughter, you are basically given free reign of the place. You can wander around, you can interact with the locals, you can give them gifts in order to improve relations with them. You can eventually romance characters, although it's just dating, you can't marry any of them. You can go fishing, you can do some work on the side to get a bit of extra money, and you can follow a progression similar to what you would see from the likes of something like Stardew Valley, or the Harvest Moon series, or Rune Factory, or something along those lines, where as you continue to get materials, you can gradually upgrade your tools. Those tools make it easier to gather materials, and as you continue to progress, you'll find more and more resilient materials that you'll need those better tools for, and that will give you access to more potions that you can brew, which in turn lets you cure more ailments. You can also upgrade the facilities you work out of to not only be able to brew more potions, but also to see more patients, as well as get better pay for curing their ailments. And that's pretty much it, actually. There's not really a whole lot to this game, which is why I didn't actually make a full review. I actually finished the entire storyline of the game. I theoretically could have made a review, but there's just not a whole lot going on here. The potion brewing mechanic is about the most complicated thing there, and it's just block puzzles. You just have ingredients that take up a certain arrangement of blocks, sort of like in Tetris, and you just need to arrange them in a pattern to brew a cure. And sure, the further you progress, the more complex the cures get for how you need to arrange those ingredients, but it's still just a fairly simple block puzzle, and even just diagnosing the illnesses that are plaguing the townsfolk is a very simple process as well. You select the site you want to diagnose, and then you go through a brief minigame, which is basically just going to be pressing the directional buttons at the appropriate time, whether that be in a sort of Simon Says format, or just a sequence that scrolls along the screen and you have to press the right button at the right time. It's all very simple and straightforward stuff with really no challenge to it whatsoever. And while that's not necessarily a problem for a game that's clearly trying to be more laid back and casual, it does mean that if that core potion brewing mechanic of just arranging blocks in a pattern and the minigames don't really appeal to you, then you're probably just not going to like it. That's not necessarily to say that it's a bad game, because it's not. It's just that the gameplay loop doesn't really have a whole lot to latch on to. As a result, I have a really hard time recommending it to anybody. It does have a demo available, so if it seems like something you might be interested in, you might as well give the demo a try. But just understand that once you've played it for about 30 minutes or so, you've experienced basically everything there is to experience with regards to gameplay mechanics, and it's just going to be extremely small variations on that throughout the entire rest of the game, and the writing just isn't strong enough to hold up the rest of the game. Last for this particular video, we have Potionomics, developed by Voracious Games and published by Xseed and Marvelous USA, and it was released in October of last year. And it's more or less the opposite in tone to every single other game that I am showing off in this particular video. Because despite appearances, despite the incredibly charming and extremely high quality animation, the quirky character designs, and the impression of being an upbeat, laid-back experience, Potionomics is not a laid-back and relaxing game. It is a very stressful game, because every single thing you do in this thing is on a timetable. You see, it turns out that the character you play as, Sylvia, inherits her uncle's potion shop, and finds out that she also inherits his debt along with it. And in order to pay that debt back, she has to brew specific potions at high quality levels to win potion making competitions every 10 days. This wouldn't necessarily be a problem if it weren't for a few things. The first of them is that every single thing you do in this game has a time cost, whether it's interacting with NPCs, whether it's sourcing ingredients or brewing potions, whatever it may well be. It has a time cost. So if you want to actually win the potion making competitions, you need to be constantly budgeting out your time with a very narrow focus, and that focus is entirely on brewing towards those potions. If you do anything else, then you are not using your time optimally, and there's a very high chance that you will lose. But the second problem is far worse, because it's not just that you have to budget your time out accordingly, it's that you have to contend with RNG. Sourcing ingredients is a fairly random process, so by the time the competition rolls around, you may just not have gotten access to the ingredients you need in order to produce the potions that will allow you to win that competition. That's all bad enough, but the biggest problem with this entire process is that if you were not aware of these things before going into the game at all, you wouldn't necessarily know that you actually need to make backup saves in order to prevent this from soft locking you. 'Cause sure, the game makes autosaves, but those are at the start of every day, so if you load your autosave from the day before the competition, well, too bad, you're probably not gonna have the time, resources, or anything that you need to be able to make the potions in order to win the competition, thus effectively locking yourself into a game over loop. So rather than being able to focus on the things that are actually interesting about the game or the things that are really charming about it, it forces you to focus on time management and RNG. If the RNG favors you early on, then congratulations, you're set. You can actually go off and do the things that are kinda interesting about the game. But if it doesn't favor you at all, or if it doesn't favor you enough in the early stage, well, you're gonna be scrambling to try to get things done within the time limit, and probably having the RNG screw you over anyway. So yeah, definitely don't be fooled by the cozy vibes the game gives off from appearances, because it is not laid back and cozy. It is stressful and it is frustrating, and it reminds me a hell of a lot of Racketeer, except that Racketeer was actually a bit more forgiving. As such, I really just can't recommend this one at all. So there you have it, folks, my thoughts on 5 different games that are based around the concept of alchemy and potion making. Bit of an odd trend there, but certainly not an unwelcome one. Didn't really lend themselves all that well to full-on reviewing, so they ended up being covered in a multi-game My Thoughts on video instead, but at least it's something a bit different. Now that this video is done, I'm going to go ahead and start moving on into the Request Month 2023 content, so stay tuned for all of that. If you have questions for the Q&A video, go ahead and check out my announcement video on Request Month 2023 and leave a question in the comments, or if you support the channel on Patreon, you can either throw it in the post that I put up on Patreon there, or you can just send it directly to me via direct message, and I'll go ahead and throw that in the lineup for the Q&A video this year. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all in later videos.